5 true scary ghost stories you'll wish you didn't hear. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some noises should be left alone. And some stories, once you hear them, you can never forget. The accounts you're about to hear aren't make-believe. They're real, they're personal, and they are deeply unsettling. These are the moments that shattered someone's idea of reality. And they might just shatter yours, too. We've all had those moments we can't quite explain, haven't we? A flicker of movement in the corner of your eye, a whisper that sounds like it's right beside you, or that gut-wrenching feeling that you're being watched in an empty room. Most of the time, we brush it off. We find a logical reason. But what happens when you can't? What happens when the unexplained gets right in your face, leaving you with zero doubt that you have just met something that is not from this world? Tonight, we have 5 true, terrifying accounts of ghostly encounters that will have you questioning everything. These stories come from different people, different places, but they all have one chilling thing in common. They left the people who lived them forever changed. Story 1. The Chained Man of Athens. My name is Athenodorus, and I am a philosopher. My whole life has been a search for logic and reason, a way to explain the world through Stoic principles. I truly believed that every mystery had a neat solution, every shadow a simple source of light. That is, until I came to Athens and rented a house that nobody else dared to set foot in. It was a huge, sprawling villa, but it was suspiciously cheap. When I asked the owner why, he got cagey. But the locals, they weren't shy. They told me about a specter, a skinny old man who haunted the halls at night, dragging heavy chains behind him. They said the sound alone could drive you mad. Naturally, I brushed it off as local superstition. The first few nights, perfectly quiet. I spent my evenings writing, actually enjoying the peace and quiet of the huge house. But then, on the 4th night, I heard it, a faint clanking coming from the other side of the house. I tried my best to ignore it. It's an old house. It's just the wind. Houses settle. But the sound got louder, closer, and more distinct. It was, without a doubt, the sound of iron scraping across a stone floor. It was moving slowly, making its way through the halls, straight for my study. My heart was pounding in my chest, a feeling I hated. I'm a man of logic, not some scared child. I gripped my stylus, took a deep breath, and just waited. The sound stopped right on the other side of my door. Then silence. A moment later, the door creaked open. I looked up, and I saw him. He was just like the townspeople described. The ghost of an old man, gaunt and dirty, with a long beard and these wild, haunted eyes. His wrists and ankles were bound in heavy, rusted chains that he had to drag with every single agonizing step. He just stared at me. Then, he raised a bony finger and beckoned for me to follow before turning around and walking away, the chains clattering behind him. Every instinct in my logical brain screamed no, but I followed him. My mind was racing, trying to come up with any rational explanation. Was this a trick of the light? A waking dream? He led me out into the courtyard, pointed to a single spot on the ground, and then vanished into thin air. I marked the spot. The very next day, I had the magistrates send men to dig right there. For a while, they found nothing but dirt and rock. I was starting to feel like a complete fool. But then, one of them yelled. They'd found something. Buried just a few feet down was the skeleton of a man, tangled up in old, corroded iron chains. We gave the remains a proper public burial. After that day, the house was finally silent. The ghost of the chained man of Athens was gone, but my view of the world was shattered. Some things I learned can't be explained away by logic. Story 2. The puppy in the basement. We had just moved into our dream home, our first real family house. It was a nice 2-story in a quiet neighborhood with a big backyard for the kids, and it had a full, unfinished basement. My husband saw a future man cave, a place for all his tools. I just saw a good spot for Christmas decorations. But our 6-year-old daughter, Lily, apparently saw something else entirely. A few weeks after we moved in, she started begging for a puppy. We kept telling her, maybe when you're a little older. But she was relentless. She told us we didn't need to buy one because there was already a puppy living in our basement. She said she could hear it whimpering at night. We just laughed. You know how kids are. Their imaginations run wild. We told her it was just the house making noises, that old pipes can sound like all sorts of things. But she would not let it go. Every few days, she'd bring it up again, saying she heard the puppy crying for its mom. He sounds so sad, she'd say, her little face all scrunched with worry. Just to make her feel better, my husband and I went down into the cold, concrete basement. We looked everywhere behind the furnace, inside old boxes, under the stairs. Of course, we found nothing. No puppy, not even a sign that any animal had ever been down there. According to Lily, the whimpering didn't stop. But about a month later, the sound started to change. One night, my husband and I were watching TV, and we heard it too. Only it wasn't a little whimper anymore. It was a low growl. It was so deep, it seemed to vibrate up through the floorboards. A guttural sound that made the hair on my arms stand right up. It was coming from directly below us. We both froze and just stared at each other. My husband hit mute on the TV. We just listened. And there it was again, this rumbling growl that sounded way too big for the space under our house. This wasn't some raccoon that got trapped. This was something else. Suddenly, the growl was cut off by a loud scratching noise, like giant claws being dragged across the concrete floor. That was it. We grabbed Lily out of her bed and checked into a hotel for the night. We tried so hard to convince ourselves there was a logical explanation, a stray dog that somehow got in and out. But we never found a single way an animal could have entered, and we could never explain the sheer volume of those sounds. We put the house on the market the very next week. We never told the new owners about the puppy in the basement, but I can't help but wonder if their kids can hear it too. Story 3. The Shadow Man in the Doorway. My family had just bought a new place, but it was a serious fixer-upper. It was an old apartment we were renovating ourselves. For a few months, it was pure chaos. Walls were half-painted, tools were everywhere, and there was a layer of dust on everything. The whole place felt like it was in between, not quite a construction site, but not yet a home. Maybe that's why it felt like something else was there with us, just waiting in the spaces between what was and what would be. I was about 15. My bedroom was one of the first to be mostly done, but it still didn't have a door, just an empty frame. One night, I was sitting on my bed, reading a book. My dog Buster, a German shepherd who was usually afraid of nothing, was sleeping at my feet. It was quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the fridge down the hall. Out of nowhere, Buster let out this soft, low growl. His head was pointed right at my doorway. I looked up, thinking it was my mom or dad, but no one was there. I told him to hush, thinking he just heard a noise from outside, but he didn't calm down. He jumped to his feet. The fur on his back stood straight up, and his growl got deeper. I looked at the doorway again, and that's when I saw him. Standing completely still in the frame was the silhouette of a man. It wasn't a normal shadow from a lamp or something. It was a figure made of pure, flat, featureless black. It was tall, filling most of the doorway, and you could clearly see the outline of a head and shoulders. But there were no details, no face, no clothes, nothing. It was just a void in the shape of a person. I couldn't breathe. My body was locked up with a kind of primal fear I'd never felt before. The figure just stood there, watching me. Buster, my brave dog, went from growling to letting out a terrified yelp, a sound I have never heard him make before or since. He scrambled backwards across the floor, trying to get away, and just huddled in the corner of the room, whining. Seeing my dog that scared broke me out of my trance. I screamed. My parents came running down the hall, and as their footsteps got louder, the shadow man just vanished. 1 second he was there, the next, the doorway was empty. My parents tried to explain it away. They said it must have been the headlights of a passing car, but I know what I saw. And Buster knew it too. We finished the renovations and moved out a few months later. We never saw the figure again, but I'll never forget it. Sometimes I drive by that house and see the new family living there. I always wonder if they've ever seen the man in the doorway. Story 4. The Navajo Land Encounter. My family lived way out in the high desert, on a huge piece of land miles from the nearest town. It was beautiful, but the land had a history. It was on a former Navajo settlement, and if you looked hard, you could still find old arrowheads and bits of pottery. The locals, mostly Navajo, had warned my dad when he bought the property. They talked about old spirits and things that walked in the night. My dad, being the practical man he is, just nodded politely. We got used to the normal desert sounds at night, coyotes yipping, the wind blowing through the sagebrush. But one night, we heard something else. It started with these weird yips and growls, but they sounded wrong, disconnected. It wasn't a coyote pack. It sounded more like a single animal trying to sound like a pack. My older brother, always curious and a little too brave, grabbed a big flashlight and went out onto the porch to see what it was. I watched him from the living room window. He shined the beam across the property, cutting through the darkness. For a long time, nothing. The strange sounds had stopped. Then he just froze. The flashlight beam was locked onto something at the very edge of our property. From the window, I couldn't make out what he was looking at, but I saw his whole body go stiff with fear. He started backing up slowly toward the house, fumbled with the doorknob, and then burst inside, slamming and locking the door behind him. His face was ghost white, and he was breathing hard. "Don't go outside," was all he could whisper, his voice shaking. He told us what he saw. Caught in the flashlight beam was a figure, crouched low to the ground. He said it was shaped like a person, but it wasn't human. It had a tattered animal pelt draped over its head and back. Its face was unnaturally pale, almost white, and its eyes were wide and black, reflecting the light in a way no animal's eyes should. As he was telling us this, we heard a new sound from outside. It was a scream, but it was a terrifying copy of a human voice. It sounded like a woman screaming in pure terror, but the pitch was just off, inhuman. It was a sound designed to trick you, to lure you out by preying on your instinct to help. We all just stood there in the living room, frozen with a fear that felt ancient. We knew, without a single doubt, that we were not alone, and whatever was outside did not have good intentions. We never talked about it after that night, and none of us ever dared to go outside after dark on that land again. Story 5. The Bell Witch Haunting. Some stories just become local legends, things you whisper around a campfire. But the story of my family, the Bell family, is different. It's not just a legend. It's a piece of American history, a history written in pure terror. My name is John Bell, and this witch, is what took my life. It all started small, back in 1817, on our farm in Adams, Tennessee. At first, it was just little noises. A faint scratching on the outside walls of our cabin. A thumping sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. We looked for rats, for loose floorboards, for anything, but we never found a source. Soon, the sounds became more personal. We'd hear whispers in the dark, the sound of someone gasping for air when we were all alone. My youngest daughter, Betsy, started saying she was being tormented at night. An invisible force, she said, would pull her hair and leave red welts on her skin. Then the entity got bolder. It wasn't just a presence anymore. It was a voice. a raspy, cruel voice that spoke to us. It claimed to be the witch of a local woman named Kate Batts, but many of us thought it was something much older, much more demonic. It hurled insults, it sang disgusting songs, and it took a special sadistic interest in me and my daughter, Betsy. It would slap and pinch us, leaving bruises we showed to the dozens of visitors who came to see the haunting for themselves. Neighbors, skeptics, even a future president, Andrew Jackson, came to our farm. Most of them left as firm believers. The attacks just got more and more violent, a constant physical assault from an invisible monster. The entity's hatred for me was absolute. It swore it would kill me. Over the next few months, my health fell apart. I started having seizures and had trouble swallowing. My face and tongue would swell up for no reason, and the witch would gloat, its disembodied voice cackling that it was the one causing all my pain. In December of 1820, I fell into a stupor and couldn't be woken up. My family found a strange little bottle in the medicine cabinet. The witch's voice shrieked with joy, claiming it had forced me to drink what was inside. A doctor tested the dark liquid on a cat, and the animal died almost instantly. I passed away the next day. My death is unique in American history. It's the only case where a supernatural entity was officially blamed for causing a person's death. The haunting of my family didn't completely stop after I was gone, but its most violent chapter was over. They say the Bell Witch, however, still remains on that land, a malevolent spirit forever tied to our family's tragedy. The dark is full of stories. These were just 5 of them. The world is so much older and stranger than we can really wrap our heads around, and every now and then, the curtain between our world and the next wears terrifyingly thin. So the next time you hear a weird noise in your house, or you get that creepy feeling that you're not alone, remember these stories. You might not be imagining it. If you made it this far, do you have a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We read every single one. For more true scary stories that'll have you sleeping with the lights on, make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. What you choose to believe is your business. But for the people who actually lived through these events, belief wasn't a choice. It was a terrifying new reality that was forced on them. Sleep well, if you can. 5 true night shift horror stories that still haunt me. The night shift has a silence all its own. It's this heavy, pressing quiet that most people mistake for peace. But if you spend enough time in it, you learn the silence is just a canvas. And sometimes, things that have been waiting in the dark decide to paint on it. I've been a security guard for 15 years, working in gleaming office buildings, dusty warehouses, you name it. At my current post, this is different. I'm at the old St. Jude's Hospital, a place that's been empty for a decade, just waiting for the wrecking ball. The city pays me to walk these halls and make sure no one gets in. They're worried about vandals. They should be worried about what's already here. Tonight feels heavier than usual. The air is thick and the silence has teeth. For the last hour, a cold spot has been following me, clinging to me like a second skin. It's a feeling you get used to in this line of work. A warning. It's the kind of cold that comes before the story. And it reminds me of a tale an old-timer told me when I first started. A lesson about how some places hold on to their pain. Section 1. The Haunted Office Elevator. He was a guard at a high-rise downtown, one of those steel and glass towers that scrape the clouds. His job was simple. Sit at the desk, watch the cameras, and do a patrol every 2 hours. For months, it was the easiest money he'd ever made. Then the elevator started acting up. It started small. Around 3 a.m., the light for the main elevator would just ding. The doors would slide open to an empty car, and then slide shut. He figured it was old wiring, an electrical ghost. But then he started hearing things through the security intercom inside the car. It was faint at first, like a radio playing in another room. Then it got clearer. It was a woman, sobbing. A heartbroken, desperate sound that made the hair on his arms stand on end. He'd checked the surveillance footage, and the feed would always show the elevator doors opening and closing on empty floors. He could hear the weeping through his speaker, but the car itself was always vacant. One night, he'd had enough. When the ding echoed through the lobby, he stood up, walked to the elevator, and pressed the call button. The doors opened. The sobbing on the intercom was louder than ever, like it was right there in front of him, but the car was empty. He almost turned away, but then a flicker of movement on the polished floor caught his eye. A reflection. For just a split second, he saw her, a woman in an 80s-style business suit, looking at him with hollow eyes before the reflection vanished. The next day, he did some digging and found an old newspaper article. An employee had taken her own life in that exact elevator decades ago. He quit the next week. He said he couldn't stand the thought that every night she was still trying to get help, just riding that car endlessly, her sorrow trapped between floors. Section 2. The shadow in the fast food restaurant. A loud bang from the end of the hall jolts me back to right now. It came from the maternity ward. I pull out my flashlight, the beam cutting a nervous path through the dark. That cold spot I felt earlier has intensified, and it's not just following me anymore. It feels like it's leading me. I walk slow, my footsteps echoing way too loud. As I pass the old nurse's station, a wheelchair that was tucked in a corner starts to roll out into the corridor, its wheels squeaking. It stops right in my path, like it's blocking me. Okay, that's new. That's direct. It reminds me of a story a kid told me, back when I worked security at a 24-hour fast food joint. He was a teenager, working the late shift to save up for a car. His job was to clean the fryers and mop the floors after they closed. He was always alone. For the first few weeks, it was fine. Then he started seeing it, a shadow darting just at the edge of his vision. He'd whip his head around, but nothing was ever there. He blamed it on being tired, on the flickering fluorescent lights, but the shadow got bolder. He started hearing whispers that sounded like they were coming from the drive-through speaker, even when the system was off. One night, while cleaning the grill, he felt that sudden, intense feeling of being watched. He turned, and for the first time, he saw it clearly. A tall, slender shadow standing in the doorway to the back storage room. It had no features, just a void in the shape of a person. It didn't move. It just stood there. He was frozen, mop in hand, heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't scream, couldn't move. The shadow seemed to stretch, to lean forward, and then it just dissolved. He ran out of there and called his manager, flat out refusing to go back inside. The manager didn't even sound surprised. He told the kid the story. Years ago, a young woman working the night shift was robbed and murdered right there. They never caught the guy. The manager said other closers had seen things too. A shadowy figure that haunts the building, her spirit forever tied to the place where her life was cut short. Section 3. The delivery to the party that wasn't. The wheelchair in front of me is still. I push it aside and keep heading towards the maternity ward, my light dancing over peeling paint. The cold has a focus now, pulling me toward one room at the end of the hall, room 217. The door is slightly ajar. I know for a fact I checked this entire wing when my shift started. Every door was closed, locked. As I get closer, I hear something. It's not a whisper or a sob. It's the faint, tinny sound of a lullaby. It makes me think of a story that always unsettled me, about a delivery that should have never been made. This story came from a pizza guy. He was young, working late on a Saturday. He gets a call for a delivery way out in the sticks, down a long, unpaved road he'd never been on. The address leads him to this remote cabin deep in the woods. As he pulls up, he can hear the faint sounds of a party music, laughter, talking, but the cabin itself is completely dark. Not a single light on. He grabs the pizza and walks to the front door. The party sounds getting louder as he gets closer. It sounded like a full-blown rager, yet the windows were just black mirrors. He knocks. The party noises stop instantly. The silence was so sudden and total, it felt like a physical blow. The door creaks open, and a man is standing there. He looks pale and tired, but he smiles. He tells the driver to bring the food inside, that they were waiting. The driver feels this deep, primal dread. He looks past the man into the cabin and sees nothing but darkness and furniture covered in dust. There was no party. He stammers some excuse, says he has to get something from his car, and just backs away. The man's smile never wavers. The driver gets in his car and floors it, not looking back. When he told his boss, the old man just shook his head, told him that cabin's been abandoned for years. A whole family died there during a holiday party carbon monoxide leak. Every so often, someone gets a call for a delivery out there. A party that ended a long time ago, but somehow is still going on. Section 4. The elderly resident's last smile. The lullaby from room 217 stops as I reach the door. I push it open. The room is empty, just a layer of dust covering everything. A mobile of faded yellow ducks hangs motionless over an empty crib. The cold is intense in here, so cold I can see my breath. On the small bedside table, one single object sits completely free of dust. A patient chart. My hands are shaking as I pick it up. The name on the chart is Eleanor Vance. Date of admission, over 30 years ago. This feels different, more personal. This isn't just a random haunting. It feels like a message. It brings to mind another story I heard. One that proves some spirits don't just want to scare you. They want you to know something. A friend of mine was a night nurse at a nursing home. Tough job, dealing with that fragile line between life and death every shift. One night, she was doing her rounds when she saw an elderly resident, a woman named Agnes, wandering the halls at 3 a.m. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, vacant, and she had this serene, almost sweet smile on her face. My friend gently guided her back to her room, tucked her in, and went on with her rounds. 10 minutes later, she saw Agnes again, standing at the far end of another corridor, still with that same unsettling smile. This was impossible. The doors were locked, and Agnes was way too frail to move that fast. My friend, now totally on edge, got another nurse to help her put Agnes back to bed, making sure the door was secure. They watched the room for a while, but nothing happened. The next morning, the day shift nurse found Agnes. She had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her face was frozen in that same sweet smile. My friend was shaken. She told an older, more experienced nurse what she'd seen. The older nurse wasn't surprised at all. She said it happens sometimes. Just before a resident passes, they see Agnes walking the halls with her smile. No one knows who she was, but they believe she's a spirit who comes to comfort the dying, to help guide them from one place to the next. She wasn't a bad omen. She was a final, peaceful escort. Section 5. The hospital's unseen patient. I look down at the chart in my hand. Eleanor Vance. The cause of death section is blank. The physician's signature is an unreadable scrawl. The lullaby starts again, this time from the hallway behind me. I turn, and I see her, a faint, translucent figure of a woman in a hospital gown, standing where the wheelchair was. She's not looking at me. She's looking back towards the way I came towards the hospital's old, abandoned morgue. The message is getting clearer now. She doesn't want to hurt me. She wants me to follow. She wants me to see. It's like a final story from this place, the one that ties all the others together. This last one hits close to home. It happened to a janitor at another old city hospital, a lot like this one. He was cleaning a recently emptied wing late one night. It was dead quiet, just the hum of his floor buffer. Suddenly, The nurse call button from one of the empty rooms went off, its jarring beep echoing down the hall. He went to the room, expecting to find a squatter or some kids messing around. He opened the door. The room was empty. The bed was perfectly made, not a wrinkle in the sheets, but the air was freezing. He walked over to the bed to reset the call button, and that's when he saw it. An impression on the mattress, as if someone was lying there watching him. He could see the distinct shape of a head on the pillow and the faint outline of a body under the covers. He backed out of the room, his heart pounding. He told the nurses at the main desk what he saw, and they just nodded. They said that room belonged to a patient who had died under tragic and mysterious circumstances years ago. The official report was inconclusive. They said that sometimes his call button still rings, and the night staff can feel him there, waiting, not for a nurse, but for someone to finally know what really happened to him. So now I'm standing in this dusty corridor of St. Jude's. The spectral image of a woman is pointing me towards the morgue. I look from her to the patient chart in my hand. Eleanor Vance. I think I understand now. She's not a threat. She's a victim. Something happened in this hospital, in that morgue, and she can't rest until someone knows the truth. The silence of the night shift isn't empty. It's full of stories, full of echoes, full of people who are gone but not forgotten, just waiting for someone to finally listen. I have a choice. Walk away, finish my shift, and let this story remain a ghost. Or follow her down this cold, dark hall and see how this last, terrifying chapter ends. These are the kinds of stories that get under your skin, the ones that make you check the locks twice. If you've ever had an experience you can't explain, share it in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories from the darkest corners of the night, make sure you subscribe. Now, I have to decide. What would you do?